So Peter, what are your thoughts about collaboration? What does that word mean to you? How can you best describe it?
Collaboration, it's two organisations or more than two working together to achieve what they both want to get. So it's working together to achieve mutually acceptable results.
Why do you think parties might actually collaborate?
Well, they're going to collaborate because they will see a benefit in doing so. Nobody's going to collaborate if it leaves them worse off, so they're going to expect to see some kind of benefit at the end of it. And that's where you've got to structure your entire organisation and the way of working to try and achieve those benefits for both parties, your employer and contractor.
So is that a similar theory to sort of aligned objectives in procurement, where you're looking to actually understand both parties' objectives and set about trying to meet each other's?
Yeah, it's probably more than aligning of objectives. This is more on the line of saying, well, we know what your objectives are, we will work together to try and achieve those objectives. So the employer will be committed to working with the contractor to, as far as possible, see that the contractor makes a profit, whilst the contractor will be working closely with the employer to make sure that the employer gets what they wanted.
Okay, so keeping on the theme of sort of when you might collaborate, do you think collaboration is appropriate for every project or every contract, or do you need to be selective?
Well, you've got to think about what's the alternative to collaboration. It's non-collaboration. In other words, hands off, apart from each other, and if there's an issue, we will sort it out ourselves, and I'll tell you what the answer is later. So, yeah, if you go to a shop and you buy a product, you don't collaborate with the guy who's selling you the product. That's a very simple transaction. So there could well be projects where you don't need to collaborate, or put it another way, the benefits of collaboration are not particularly obvious. So therefore, you wouldn't go down a route of trying to do very much to promote and to stimulate collaboration.
Now, have you seen collaboration throughout your career, inadvertently, deliberately, accidentally, or do you think it's just sort of a modern buzzword, if you like?
I wouldn't put it in a modern buzzword, but I would say it's a change of emphasis in the industry. Construction industry historically was far from collaborative. Historically, it's been very adversarial, very much of a struggle of one against the other. The employer wants to get what they want at the lowest possible price. As soon as possible, the contractor wants to make the maximum possible profit out of the contract. The two objectives of the parties can be quite opposite, in that the contractor may be looking to make a massive profit, doesn't really care too much what the employer gets as long as he gets paid for it and there's no hassle, whilst the employer doesn't mind whether or not the contractor gets a profit or not, as long as he gets his scheme. Now that is the old-fashioned way of working. More recently, we've realised that by working together, dealing with problems as they arise and making sure that we're both parties are dealing with the issues and collaborating, you actually get a better result. So whilst it's a rather modern approach, I wouldn't have called it a buzzword. I would have said it's a better way of working.
Is that something which is natural to us, without you trying to expect you to be a behavioural consultant, but is that in our DNA? Is that a normal thing to do? Do you think we're wired up to do these things, or do you think that's a step change for us?
I think naturally people prefer to be happy. It's one of the tools of confrontation is to make the person back off because they're not happy. People got a natural tendency, want to enjoy life, want to be happy, and therefore collaboration is rather more natural than an adversarial approach. So I don't think there's a problem behind it in terms of tuition. It's more a matter of changing entrenched attitudes of those within the industry.
We are, of course, talking, I suppose, primarily about the construction industry, and there are many other industries that perhaps suggest they've got their house in order and we should get ours in order. I mean, we are in the UK, one of those industries that actually has a special court designed specifically to hear construction disputes, which I've always found to be quite comical. So any thoughts on that? That we actually need, we are so bad, or have been so bad, we need a special court. I can see the special technical expertise, but it's a bad thing. Court litigation surely leads to bad results or bad outcome for users of the process. Something's gone wrong.
It does, and that's an accident of history, if you like. We've been very bad at construction. We've always had disputes. They've been pretty massive, and to deal with those, we've set up a special court to deal with it. Now, the day may come in the future where that court is closed down. That'd be very nice if it happens. Don't hold your breath for the short term, but longer term, if we can get away from the adversarial way of working and more collaborative, then there's less need for such courts. Yeah,
that'll be a happy day. I'll enjoy that day. So if that's touched upon the theory of collaboration then, so what do you think that NEC does to promote, NEC 3 contracts do to promote collaboration?
Well, there's a strong collaborative contract. I mean, if you look at the very start, the very first clause, work in a spirit of mutual trust and cooperation, that's a collaborative type of approach to the contract. Within the contract, there's a number of procedures and processes which are aimed at stimulating collaboration, rewarding collaboration, and indeed providing some kind of remedy if it doesn't happen the way it should. For example, the obvious one is the early warning. Early warning is a way of the two parties sitting down when they perceive a problem is coming. Instead of waiting for the problem and seeing whose fault it was, you work out in advance how to deal with the problem. And you notice that the clause on early warning says that you look for a result which is beneficial to both parties, not just for the employer. So that's an example. The whole approach of using programs, the whole approach of using compensation event assessments is all based on working together to get the best possible result.
Okay, and of course option X12, partnering, can exist in a multi-party context as well.
Yeah, this is where you want to build in the same collaborative relationship with other parties who are involved in the same project. They might be consultants, other contractors if you've got multiple contractors on a job, or contractors, subcontractors, suppliers, various levels. This is the same point. You apply the same process and principles of collaboration across all the members of that partnership.
We have in X12 and X20 KPIs. I was just wondering if you've any thoughts on if you will actually measure collaboration and how you might measure collaboration. Any thoughts on that?
Well, you would measure collaboration by looking at the tools that you've got in the contract for securing collaboration and seeing how well they're being used. So you would look in the KPIs as to whether you're actually managing those processes in an appropriate collaborative way. For example, with a compensation event, do you simply get one party produces something, send it to the other sends it back with comments, and you then get a revised submission, or are they actually working together to try and find a good solution? Yeah. So you measure those things.
So simple measurements are a good indicator of whether or not collaboration is or isn't.
Well, if you're
do something about
yes, if you're following all the processes in the contract to collaborate and everybody's happy about it, then you're going to record good KPIs.
And any thoughts on the future perhaps for collaboration, if that is something we're absolutely destined to achieve? What might NEC contracts do in the future that would help parties achieve even greater levels of collaboration than perhaps they're achieving now?
Well, I think there's a range of ways of dealing with this one. You can collaborate on a whole variety of types of contract, which could range from even at one extreme on a lump sum type of contract. You could collaborate on that through to a target contract. You could go to the whole hog and have an alliance contract where both parties are financially committed to this project and both share in the achievement of that project's benefits. So there's a whole range of things you could go to, and I think the NEC contracts are pretty uniquely placed to deal with most of those.
Okay, so that's recognising there are degrees of collaboration.
Yeah.
From this point to that point, and you need to decide where it is
yes.
is appropriate
yes.
for you,
yeah.
Where you need to get to, how you're going to get there, if it's right in the circumstances.
Yes.
Okay, so the top of the tree, i.e., let's say alliance isn't right for everybody, of course.
No, because it may be that the level of risk that the employer is prepared to take is not that great. Equally, it may be that the contractor isn't prepared to share in that particular risk of that project. It can be quite damaging and disastrous for a contractor if you have a really large project that goes wrong. Alliancing will not work in the case where the risk is too great and larger than one of the parties can bear.
Thanks for that, Peter. So my final question is about the procurement stages of a project, really. How do you know, or how do you go about getting teams of people with whom will have the correct or the right collaborative approach, and you make sure you appoint those people with whom you think there's a good fit?
Well, I think there's a number of factors to this. I mean, the first thing is that the employer must decide that they actually positively want to collaborate. They must understand what that means, what the implications are, and decide, yes, this is the way I want to go, and therefore I will now make sure that everything I do is aimed at achieving that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you then must produce a set of procurement documents which promote that. And that means both using a sensible contract such as NEC, which actually promotes and facilitates collaboration, but also the procurement method must do so. I mean, it's crazy to think that you can actually award a contract on the basis of lowest price to an open bid and then expect the contractor to collaborate with you. You've got to have a contract award process, i.e. a procurement process, which is aimed at finding a contractor who will want to collaborate. Some good examples of that we've heard of, where behavioural assessments can be brought in, a whole range of things brought in, where your focus is not simply on getting the lowest price, but on getting the best contractor who's going to give you the best final result through working together jointly to deal with all the risks on the contract, minimise the consequences, and therefore achieve your objectives the most effective way. If you do that in terms of procurement, then you've got a good chance of getting a very good collaborative contract. If you miss any one of those three out, it's unlikely it will work.
Okay, and you need, of course, look beyond just the contractor, so his key subcontractors,
Yeah.
and maybe designers, professional team, depends who's doing the design. And what about the client side of things? How does the client know whether he's actually in a position, through his own people, that they are collaborative minded?
Well, I think this comes at the start. If the client needs to decide that they want to actively have a collaborative arrangement, they have got to be set up to do that. If they're not set up to do it, then they can't really achieve it. They would perhaps need to bring in somebody from outside to do it for them, to run the contract for them, who could achieve that, or train their people up, reorganise their structure so that they were able to achieve it. Both contractor and employer must be ready to do that. And you mentioned subcontractors. Through the process of a procurement, you're going to be looking and seeing how is the contractor going to collaborate, and that must feed down through to how he brings his supply chain into that process, because most contractors today will have a fair number of subcontractors working for them and suppliers. They won't do all the work themselves, and therefore you need to understand how that part of the process will also feed into the collaborative relationship. And that's all going to be part of your tender assessment process.
Yeah, and we're beyond theory now. We should be into practice. So prove how it is you've been collaborating,
Yes.
and or managing your supply chain for the past few periods.
Well, one of the techniques we've used in the past is to say, set out in a very clear procedures what you're going to use to make sure we do collaborate, and then please give me examples from previous contracts where you've done that actual thing and it's worked, and as a result you've had a good contract, and tell me who the contact name is and I'll give him a ring to make sure that he agrees with you.
Okay, Peter Higgins, thank you very much.
Okay, Rob, good to chat.